She didn't lose everything in one mistake. She lost it slowly, by believing for years that she didn't deserve better. This is the story of what happens when a woman finally looks at her past and chooses herself anyway. She was already standing there when the number appeared, not expecting anything different, yet hoping for a miracle anyway. The room was quiet, but her chest felt unbearably loud inside. That number had been waiting for her longer than she imagined. And in that moment, there was nowhere left to look away. At 55, she had learned how to avoid certain things expertly. Bills went unopened, emails stayed unread, statements felt dangerous. Avoidance had once felt like protection, like emotional first aid. But protection slowly turned into a cage she decorated with excuses. Now the cage door was open, and fear stepped forward. The number wasn't dramatic, but it was final in its honesty. It reflected years of small decisions she barely remembered making. Nothing catastrophic, nothing illegal, just a slow, quiet collapse. She had told herself she would deal with it one day. That day had arrived without asking her permission. Her first instinct was still the same old reflex to run, make coffee, check her phone, distract herself with something harmless. But something inside her didn't move this time. Her body stayed frozen, but her eyes didn't close. She stayed with the discomfort longer than ever before. What surprised her most was not the fear, but the sadness. Not for the money, but for the woman she had been back then. So tired, so unsure, so convinced she didn't deserve better. She remembered choosing relief over responsibility again and again. It hadn't felt like a choice at the time. She whispered her own name without realizing she did. Saying it out loud felt grounding, like anchoring herself to now. The number stayed the same, but something inside her shifted slightly. For the first time, she didn't blame anyone else. She simply acknowledged that this was hers. That moment didn't fix anything, and she knew that clearly. But it cracked something open that had been sealed for years. Facing the truth didn't destroy her like she once believed. It hurt, yes, but it didn't end her. And that realization lingered quietly as the day moved on. Shame arrived slowly, not as a shock, but as a familiar weight. It settled into her shoulders like it had lived there before. She had carried it through dinners, holidays, and polite conversations. No one had ever pointed at her mistakes out loud. That somehow made it heavier. She remembered how often she smiled while feeling deeply unworthy. How she laughed at jokes about money, pretending they didn't sting. Every comparison became proof that she was behind, lacking, failing. She told herself other people were just more disciplined than her. That story had followed her for decades. The shame was never about the numbers alone. It was about what those numbers seemed to say about her character. Irresponsible, careless, incapable of managing adult life properly. She absorbed those labels without questioning where they came from. Over time, they became her internal voice. There were moments she could trace back clearly now. Opportunities she avoided because she felt undeserving of success. Conversations she didn't have because admitting ignorance felt humiliating. She chose silence over learning, distance over exposure. Each choice felt safer in the moment. Sitting there, she realized shame had shaped her habits. It taught her to hide instead of ask, to shrink instead of grow. She wasn't lazy or reckless the way she once believed. She was scared of confirming her own worst fears, and fear had been making decisions for her. This realization didn't bring relief immediately. If anything, it made her grief sharper and more personal. She mourned the years she spent thinking she was broken. No one had ever told her she was allowed to learn slowly. She had assumed time was already up. As evening came, the shame didn't disappear, but it changed texture, becoming something she could observe. It no longer felt like a verdict carved in stone. It felt like a signal asking to be understood, and that distinction mattered more than she expected. Avoidance had once felt like a temporary strategy, just until things got easier, just until she felt ready. She promised herself that clarity would come before action. But readiness never arrived the way she imagined it would. Avoidance quietly became her routine. She avoided numbers, conversations, and long-term planning. Anything that required looking too far ahead made her tense. Living paycheck to paycheck felt easier than facing the whole picture. At least short-term survival had clear rules and clear limits. Long-term thinking felt abstract and terrifying. Over time, she normalized the anxiety as background noise. She functioned well enough, paid what she could, moved on. Friends assumed she was managing just fine, and she let them. Admitting struggle felt like confessing a personal flaw, so she learned how to appear composed. She told herself that everyone had something they avoided. Some people avoided doctors, others avoided relationships. Hers just happened to be money and planning. She minimized it until it seemed almost reasonable. Denial can sound very logical when practiced long enough, but deep down, she always knew the cost. Every avoided moment compounded into future pressure. Every unopened envelope added weight to an invisible pile. She felt it in her sleep and in her sudden irritations. Avoidance never rested, even when she tried to. Now, looking back, she could see the pattern clearly. Avoidance wasn't laziness, it was fear dressed as comfort. It gave her immediate relief and long-term consequences. Understanding this didn't erase the damage it caused, but it softened the judgment she placed on herself. For the first time, she wondered what would happen if she stayed, if instead of running, she allowed discomfort to exist. The idea scared her more than the numbers ever had. But something told her that staying might be the real beginning, and that question followed her into the night. Responsibility arrived without drama or grand declarations. It came quietly, during an ordinary moment of stillness. She realized she was tired of pretending it wasn't her life, tired of waiting for someone else to fix what she avoided. The fatigue was deeper than fear now. For the first time, she spoke the truth out loud. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words didn't accuse or punish, they simply existed. Saying them didn't collapse her world like she expected. Instead, it grounded her. She noticed the difference between blame and responsibility. Blame crushed her chest and made her want to disappear. Responsibility felt heavier, but also strangely stabilizing. It meant the past was real, but not all-powerful. It meant she still had agency. She didn't list every bad decision or replay every regret. That would have been another form of punishment. Instead, she acknowledged the pattern and its consequences. She allowed herself to see cause and effect clearly. That clarity felt painful but honest. There was no sudden confidence or burst of motivation, just a calm awareness that avoidance was no longer an option. Responsibility didn't promise comfort or quick results. It only promised truth and consistent effort. For once, that felt enough. She felt a quiet shift in how she stood and breathed. Her shoulders relaxed just a little, without explanation. Owning her story didn't make it beautiful, but it made it real, and reality felt workable. That subtle change stayed with her. As she prepared for bed that night, something lingered. A fear remained, but it was joined by resolve. She had taken responsibility without destroying herself. Now, a new question surfaced, heavier than before. What if it was already too late to fix any of it? If this story feels familiar in any quiet way, stay with us. You can like this video and leave a comment. Sometimes sharing reminds us we're not alone. The fear arrived early the next morning, uninvited and loud. It whispered that age was not on her side anymore, that 55 was a number she couldn't negotiate with. She wondered how many doors had already closed quietly. The thought made her chest tighten. She imagined all the timelines she had missed, the savings she didn't build, the security she postponed. Her mind painted images of scarcity and dependence, not poverty, but constant vulnerability and quiet stress. The future suddenly felt very narrow. This fear felt different from shame. Shame looked backward and judged what had been done. This fear looked forward and erased possibility. It suggested that effort now would only lead to disappointment, that starting late was worse than not starting at all. She noticed how tempting it was to surrender to that idea. If it was too late, then trying was unnecessary. If failure was guaranteed, avoidance could return safely. The old pattern waited patiently for her decision. It felt familiar, almost comforting, but something resisted that conclusion this time. She thought about the woman she had been at 40, at 30, at 20, always thinking it was already too late. Time had passed whether she acted or not. That realization stopped her. She didn't suddenly believe everything would work out. She still didn't know how to fix everything she'd broken. But she questioned the authority of that fear. What if too late was just another story, she told herself? What if it wasn't a fact? As the day moved forward, the fear remained present, but it no longer controlled her movements completely. She carried it with her instead of hiding from it. That was new, and it felt fragile but real. Something had shifted, even if nothing was solved yet. That night, as she turned off the light, a thought lingered. Not hope exactly, but a quiet defiance against resignation. She didn't know if she could build prosperity, but she wondered if she could at least try, and that unanswered question stayed awake inside her. Her first action didn't look impressive from the outside. No celebration, no dramatic change, no visible transformation. She simply sat down and wrote every number she knew. Some were exact, others were estimates filled with uncertainty. Her hands trembled slightly as she kept going. She expected shame to flood her again immediately. Instead, she felt exposed, like standing without armor. Seeing everything together was uncomfortable and undeniable, but it was also strangely quieter than her imagination. Reality was harsh, but not cruel. She noticed how often she judged herself for not doing more, for not starting earlier, for not being stronger before. This step felt embarrassingly small compared to her mistakes. No one would applaud this moment if they saw it. That thought almost made her stop. Still, she stayed with it longer than she planned. She corrected a number, erased another, added a note. This wasn't mastery, it was basic awareness, yet awareness required more courage than she expected. It asked her to stay honest. There was no rush, no pressure to fix everything. She reminded herself that clarity came before strategy. This moment wasn't about solutions or victories. It was about choosing presence over avoidance. That distinction mattered deeply. When she finally stood up, she felt emotionally tired. Not defeated, just drained in a quiet way. She didn't feel proud, but she felt clean, like she had opened a window after years of stale air. That sensation lingered with her. Later that night, she almost dismissed the moment entirely, calling it insignificant, barely worth acknowledging. But a part of her knew better now. Small steps were the only steps she could take, and this one had changed something subtle inside her. Asking for help had always felt like exposure, like admitting a fundamental flaw she couldn't hide. She believed capable adults already knew these things. Not knowing felt like proof she had failed somewhere important. That belief made learning feel dangerous. She approached information cautiously, almost apologetically, reading articles slowly, pausing whenever anxiety arose. She avoided voices that sounded condescending or absolute. What she needed wasn't discipline, but gentleness, and that took time to recognize. There were moments when frustration bubbled up quickly. Terms she didn't understand triggered old insecurities. She wanted to close the page and retreat again. Her instinct was still to escape discomfort, but she noticed it sooner now. Instead of quitting, she took breaks intentionally, breathing, reminding herself she wasn't stupid. She was simply inexperienced in this one area. Learning didn't require self-punishment or urgency. It required patience she had never given herself. She realized how often she confused ignorance with inadequacy. Not knowing something felt like a moral failure. That belief had kept her stuck longer than any debt. Separating knowledge from worth felt revolutionary. It softened her internal voice. There was no single moment of clarity or mastery, just gradual understanding layered over fear. She learned enough to ask better questions, enough to feel less lost than before, enough to continue. By the end of the week, she noticed a shift. She wasn't confident, but she wasn't frozen either. Learning no longer felt humiliating. It felt like reclaiming something she was denied, and that quiet progress mattered more than she expected. The familiar urge returned when she least expected it. A decision appeared that required restraint and intention. Her body reacted before her mind could intervene. The old pattern rose, fast and persuasive. It promised relief, just like before. She recognized the sensation immediately this time. The tight chest, the rationalizations, the false urgency. It felt comforting in a dangerous way, like slipping into a habit that once protected her. Awareness didn't erase the desire. She paused longer than she ever had before. Not deciding, not acting, just noticing. The pause felt unnatural and uncomfortable, but within it, she felt a choice forming. That was new. She reminded herself of the bigger picture. Not perfection, not success, just direction. This moment wouldn't make or break her future, but it would reinforce something important internally. She felt the weight of that truth. The decision she made wasn't dramatic or heroic. She simply chose differently than she used to. It didn't feel good immediately. There was disappointment and resistance inside her. Growth rarely felt rewarding at first. Later, the emotional impact surprised her. Not joy, but a quiet sense of self-respect. She noticed she trusted herself a little more. That trust felt fragile, but real. It stayed with her longer than expected. That night, she understood something clearly. Patterns didn't disappear when recognized. They asked to be challenged repeatedly. This was only one moment, not a victory. But it proved she could pause instead of react. Progress turned out to be slower than she imagined. Each step forward revealed how much there was to learn. The excitement of beginning faded into routine effort. Some days felt heavy without obvious reward. That tired her deeply. She questioned herself more often now, wondering if this effort would ever feel worth it. Starting over at this age felt unfair at times. She envied people who had learned earlier. Comparison crept in quietly. There were evenings when she wanted to stop completely, not dramatically, just gently give up trying. Return to survival mode and accept limitations. That option always hovered nearby. It felt easier on hard days. She noticed how fatigue distorted her thinking, making the future seem smaller and darker. When tired, her old beliefs returned easily, telling her she was late, slow, behind. She learned to question thoughts born from exhaustion. Rest became an unexpected part of the process. Not avoidance, but intentional recovery. She learned to stop without abandoning herself. This balance felt unfamiliar and necessary. It kept her moving forward. The work didn't disappear when she rested, but it stopped feeling endless and punishing. She reminded herself that sustainability mattered. Burning out would only repeat old patterns. This time, she wanted something different. As weeks passed, she noticed her resilience growing. Not dramatic strength, but quiet endurance. She kept showing up even when enthusiasm faded. That consistency changed how she saw herself, and that shift carried her into the next phase. The peace arrived unexpectedly. Without announcement, she noticed it while lying in bed one ordinary night. Her mind didn't race or rehearse worst-case scenarios. For the first time, silence felt safe. That absence of fear startled her. Nothing external had changed dramatically. Her situation wasn't fixed or resolved. There were still uncertainties waiting ahead, but her relationship with them felt different. Fear no longer dominated the space. She realized how long fear had accompanied her nights, whispering reminders of failure and scarcity, preparing her for disasters that never came. That vigilance had exhausted her quietly. She hadn't noticed until it was gone. This calm wasn't confidence or certainty. It was something softer and more grounded. A sense that she was facing reality, honestly. That she wasn't hiding from herself anymore. That mattered deeply. She breathed slowly, noticing her own body. The tension she carried for years wasn't gone, but it wasn't overwhelming either. She felt present instead of bracing. That presence felt like progress. In that moment, she didn't dream of wealth. She didn't imagine a perfect future. She simply appreciated the quiet, the relief of not being at war internally. That felt like a gift. As sleep came, she held on to one thought. If peace was possible now, more was possible later. This wasn't the end of her journey, but it was proof that something was changing. And that realization stayed with her into the dark. Comparison had always crept in quietly. A glance at someone else's life was enough to trigger it. She measured her progress against invisible timelines. Every comparison ended with the same conclusion. She was behind, again. This time, something shifted when the thought appeared. She noticed how comparison drained her motivation instantly. It never inspired her, it only diminished her effort. She saw how often it erased the courage she had built. That realization stopped her cold. She began to understand how unfair her standards had been. She compared her middle to someone else's highlight. She ignored different histories, resources, and emotional burdens. The comparison was never balanced or honest. It was self-punishment disguised as motivation. Letting go didn't happen all at once. The habit was deeply ingrained and emotionally charged, but she practiced redirecting her attention gently, back to her own steps, her own pace, back to what she could control. She started measuring progress differently, not by speed, but by consistency. Not by outcomes, but by presence and intention. This reframing softened her inner dialogue. It made effort feel worthwhile again. There was relief in staying in her own lane. Her journey no longer needed validation from others. She stopped asking if she was doing enough. She asked if she was doing what was honest. That question felt grounding. As comparison loosened its grip, energy returned. Not excitement, but steady engagement. She felt less distracted by imagined judgments, more connected to her own process. That focus prepared her for deeper change. Money had always felt like a verdict. Every balance carried emotional meaning. Too little meant failure. Too much felt undeserved. There was no neutral ground in her mind, only judgment. Gradually, she began to challenge that association. She noticed money itself wasn't accusing her. It was simply information, neither kind nor cruel. Her interpretation gave it emotional power. That distinction changed everything. She practiced looking at numbers without commentary. No labels, no stories, no moral conclusions, just facts on a page, waiting to be understood. This neutrality felt uncomfortable at first, but it also felt freeing. When emotions surfaced, she didn't push them away. She acknowledged fear, grief, and regret quietly. Then she returned to the facts themselves. Separating feeling from function took effort, but it brought clarity. Money slowly became a tool again, something that could be managed and learned, not a reflection of her worth or intelligence. That shift reduced her anxiety significantly. It made action easier. She noticed she made decisions more calmly now, less reactive, less impulsive. Choices felt intentional rather than desperate. That stability surprised her. It felt earned. By releasing judgment, she reclaimed agency. Money no longer controlled her emotional state. It became part of her life, not her identity. That separation created room for growth, and growth began to feel possible. Planning had once felt like an invitation to disappointment. Imagining a future meant risking hope. Hope had always felt dangerous to her, too fragile, too easy to lose, so she avoided it. This time, planning emerged gently. Not grand visions, just modest projections. She asked herself what stability might look like. Not perfection, just enough that felt safer. She noticed fear still hovered nearby, whispering warnings about disappointment and failure. But it no longer dictated her action. She planned with caution, not paralysis. That balance felt new. Writing down future possibilities felt almost surreal. She hadn't allowed herself that freedom in years. The act itself felt rebellious, as if she was claiming space she once denied. That realization moved her deeply. She didn't promise herself miracles. She promised consistency, learning, and adjustment. Planning became flexible rather than rigid. A guide instead of a contract that changed how it felt emotionally. With each plan, her sense of deserving shifted. She stopped seeing prosperity as arrogance. It began to feel like responsibility to herself. Caring for her future felt appropriate, even necessary. As she closed her notebook, something lingered, a quiet sense of anticipation. Not excitement, but readiness. She was no longer afraid to look ahead, and that marked a turning point. Prosperity had always carried a shadow for her. If she imagined having more, guilt followed immediately. Who was she to want stability now? After all her mistakes, after all this time, the guilt felt automatic. She examined that belief carefully, where it came from, who taught it to her. She realized she equated struggle with virtue, and ease with selfishness or arrogance. That equation had kept her small. She began to redefine prosperity internally. Not excess, not status, not comparison, but safety, choice, and peace of mind. Those desires felt reasonable when named honestly. They felt human. Allowing herself to want more felt emotional. Tears came unexpectedly during simple moments. She wasn't mourning money. She was mourning permission she never had. That realization stayed with her. She practiced receiving progress without apology, acknowledging improvements without minimizing them. This felt uncomfortable, almost foreign, but it strengthened her sense of worth. It rewired something deep. Prosperity stopped feeling like betrayal, not of others, and not of her past self. It felt like continuation, not erasure. Growth didn't deny where she came from. It honored how far she'd come. By releasing guilt, she felt lighter, not careless, but unburdened. She could move forward without dragging shame. That freedom changed how she carried herself. It felt like liberation. Her life didn't transform overnight. There was no sudden wealth or dramatic ending. What changed was how she inhabited her days, with awareness, intention, and self-respect that made all the difference. She still remembered her past clearly, the mistakes, the avoidance, the fear, but those memories no longer defined her future. They became references, not sentences. That distinction felt powerful. She trusted herself now in quiet ways, to face discomfort, to learn, to adjust. Trust wasn't loud or absolute. It was built through repetition, and it felt solid. Her days carried less tension. Decisions felt aligned rather than reactive. She moved through life with more steadiness, not certainty, but confidence in her ability to respond. That confidence was earned. She no longer questioned if she deserved stability. The question itself had lost relevance. She focused instead on stewardship of her life, caring for what she was building. That felt mature and grounded. Looking ahead, she didn't demand guarantees. She accepted uncertainty as part of being alive. What mattered was her presence within it. She was no longer hiding from herself. That felt like success. Her life finally felt like it belonged to her. Not perfect, not finished, but honest. She had faced her past without being trapped by it. Step by step, she built something real. And that was more than she ever believed she deserved. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If it spoke to you, consider subscribing so we can keep walking through these quiet transformations together. Because it's never too late to begin again, and you don't have to do it alone.